I'll never get into an Uber ever again. You shouldn't either. We've all had our fair share of nasty Uber drivers. Those who are perpetually always 3 minutes away. Those with cars that smell like cigars and stale air. Those who give me the shock of my life whenever they jam brake every now and then. I guess it's all part and parcel of life. We do meet such people. My last encounter with an Uber driver 2 weeks back really put things into perspective. I almost lost my life back then. I was an avid fan of Uber. I always went out for drinks with my friends and clients, and I figured Uber would be a much safer option back home than drunk driving. I hated getting stuck in traffic as a driver. It made me angry and impatient, and I'd rather pay someone else to go through that kind of frustration. If you ask me, it is convenient and pretty affordable, especially in Uber pool. You get to meet new people, and I don't mind sharing a space with strangers. Anyway, that night was just like any other night. I had just finished a couple of leisure drinks at Casey's with my colleagues, and I was prepared to get an Uber back home. I was sober enough to take the subway or walk a few blocks down and take the bus back home, but I was way too lazy and sleepy. My Uber was arriving in a few minutes, and I was sharing the ride with 2 other passengers, Dan and Rachel. My ride came, and it was a cool black Range Rover. The car smelled like citrus. Rachel was in the passenger seat. Dan and I took the back seats. I took a quick glance at the timing. It was 11:03 p.m., and my phone battery was running flat. I asked the driver, Tim, if you could do me a favor and charge it for me. He was a nice chap. He took the phone from me and charged it. He made sure the air conditioning wasn't too cool in the back, and he went off for those bottled water placed at the side doors. Dan was happy to reach out for one. Guess he was really thirsty. We stopped in front of the red light, and I caught a glimpse of Tim's face when he turned around. He asked us, Hey, up for a riddle? We all looked at each other. Sure, why not? Tim smirked. Well, if you get it right before you arrive at your location, the trip's on me. What's better than a free ride home, am I right? Well, sure, go ahead, I chuckled. You will always find me in the past. I can be created in the present, but the future can never taint me. What am I? At this moment, I felt Dan's phone vibrating in his back pocket. He reached into his pocket and took his phone out. It was an unknown number. Dan slid to answer his call, and at the same time, Tim slammed the brakes and we all jerked forward. Glad that I'm wearing a seatbelt, he turned around and whipped Dan's phone out of his hand. Hey! No cheating. He laughed. We all chuckled along as if it were a lighthearted prank. I was so wrong. I should have figured something was up by then. We arrived in front of Rachel's house first. She had to make the first guess. Her answer was memory. It wasn't exactly wrong, but it wasn't right either, so she had to pay for the ride. Tim stepped out to help Rachel with some bags in the boot. As soon as the boot behind us closed, we heard a muffled scream, and then silence. The car windows were tinted black, but Dan and I knew what was going on. Tim had stabbed Rachel. Dan tried getting out of the car, but his legs were weak. I forced the door open and saw Rachel clutching her abdomen on the pavement. Tim slammed it shut from outside. He looked at me with those piercing, dark eyes. Give it up. You aren't going anywhere. Tim got back into the driver's seat, and we were set off to the second location, Dan's place. Let us off, you psycho! I punched the back of Tim's head. Shut up, or you're going to be dead meat, he hissed, holding the knife at my throat. Dan pulled me back. He looked so pale and weak. I glanced at the bottle he was clutching. It was the water. Tim spiked the water. I had no idea how I was going to get the both of us away from this madman when I was so riddled with fear. I was ready to resign to my fate. Tim pulled up in front of Dan's driveway. He grabbed a pistol from his glove compartment and got out. We thought he was going somewhere for a moment, but then we heard a click. I tried pushing one of the doors open, but it wouldn't budge. bastard! He locked us up in this car. We heard a clicking noise coming from Dan's door. Tim pulled Dan out before I could do anything and slammed the door shut. Shit! I squinted beyond the tinted glass of the window and I saw a faint silhouette of Dan kneeling on the ground and Tim standing above him. Dan was screaming something, but it was almost inaudible when Tim was shouting at the top of his lungs. Before I knew it, Tim pulled the trigger and fired the bullet into Dan's skull. His body dropped lifelessly onto the ground, like a paper doll. A pool of blood appeared beneath his body. I knew, for sure, I was next. I grabbed the knife Tim carelessly left in the passenger seat and I ripped my phone from the charging dock. I slid my phone into my back pocket and the knife into my waistband. Hopefully, he wouldn't notice. I just have to put up a good act. Tim got back into the car and turned to look at me. His face looked angry, yet it seemed like he was smiling on the inside. What a sicko! What was wrong with this man? I shouted in his face. Just what the fuck do you want? He took a glance at me and shifted his eyes back into the road. The right answer. As soon as we arrived at the front of my apartment, Tim forcefully dragged me out of the car by the arm. I tripped and landed right beneath his shoes. Tim laughed out loud as he knelt down and scrutinized me. He looked into my eyes, searching for an answer. As I maintained that gaze, I slyly reached into my waistband and slowly pulled out the same knife he stabbed Rachel with. He was going to pay. I whipped the knife out and plunged it deep into his side and watched as he staggered backwards and howled in pain. He tried to reach for his pistol to pull the trigger, but I kicked it aside and took it. Tim, clutching his abdomen, was limping and chasing right after me. I knew I could fire a shot right through him, but I didn't want to do it. We needed more answers from this psycho. I ran and ran and ran and ran. I was probably 4 blocks down from my apartment where the groceries and the pharmacy was when I saw the bright red lights in the distance. The police. I heaved a sigh of relief as I waved for them to stop. You would never believe it, but the person who saved us was our Uber driver. His name's Rocky, a tough-looking guy with tattoos on his biceps. Apparently, all 3 of us boarded the wrong car with the same car plate number. He tracked us down with Dan's location services and figured we were in trouble after Dan picked up his phone call and said nothing. He must have heard us. And I was nonetheless grateful. The police retrieved everything that was left in that car. They took Dan in for interrogation. I was asked to identify the bodies of the victims, Dan and Rachel. Rocky was with me throughout the entire time, and I was thankful he was there. He gave me warmth and a little assurance that things were going to be fine. He could have ignored the entire episode, but he didn't. He saved us. Good luck, mate. You'll be alright. He patted my back as I walked into the morgue. It was a cold and empty room. There laid the bodies of Dan and Rachel. Cold, pale, disheveled. I couldn't help but feel responsible for their deaths. If only I could have saved the both of them. I know it sounds silly to put someone else's death onto myself. I bet Tim didn't even feel one bit remorseful for everything that he's done. I vow to have him punished in the worst possible way. After a short lawsuit that drained all of Tim's savings, his wife divorced him and took the custody of the children. I heard from my lawyer that he went berserk, and they had to sedate him. He was immediately admitted into the mental institute, to be locked away from the rest of the world until he died. It was only after this that I learned Tim was a stalker. Coincidentally, Rachel, Dan, and I all went to the same high school as him. He has been tailing us ever since we graduated from high school, and then college, and after we each found jobs and a life of our own, he was a jealous man, and a crazy obsessed one at that. How else could he have known where we're going to be at night? How else could he have driven all the way to our doorstep? He was wary of our every single action, our every move. He was just waiting for the right chance to strike. I couldn't help but remember those dark, piercing eyes of his, very similar to the ones his son has when I saw him at court. I know very well another attack is coming soon, but this time, I'll strike first.